Welcome to the latest episode of QA Bytes. This is the second part in the Getting Real with Test Automation series. In this episode, I'm exploring the way we think about test automation. It's important because we all have some preconceived notion about what test automation is. And that's the point. We need to recognize that it's very easy for us to let those preconceived notions govern how we approach automation. What I find is that most people equate the term test automation with automatically executing actions against an application user interface. Let's see if we can break out of those preconceived notions by breaking down the term test automation into the definition of testing and automation. First, looking at this definition of testing, we see terms like knowledge, experience, critical thinking, and designing experiments. Is that what we automate when we say test automation? Of course not. Very clearly, we are not automating the testing. What's more, test automation can be and should be about a lot more than executing user actions. So let's explore that angle a little bit more. I want to look at what drives how we think about test automation. First, our personal situation. What has worked in the past and also what hasn't. Maybe we were very successful with a specific tool or approach, or automating a specific type of testing. On the flip side, maybe we're involved in a failure and for the same reasons we're now averse to a specific approach. What our skills are. Maybe with a specific tool, we know a tool inside or out, or maybe we have a deep development background with a particular language. What our role is certainly has an impact. Are we part of a test group, a developer, a DevOps engineer? If you come from a system test team or an organization with a centralized test team, you probably associate automation with GUI automation tools. If you're a developer, you likely associate automation with unit testing or API testing. If you're a DevOps engineer, you might be focused on automating the build pipeline and not thinking too much about testing at all. Similarly, our outside influences impact the way we view test automation. We read blogs, we listen to webinars, we attend conferences, and we hear wonderful stories about how this tool or that framework has provided test automation benefits beyond our wildest dreams, and we want that same success. There's nothing wrong with that. We should use our past experience, knowledge, and resources to understand and solve problems that we face. But there's an important caveat. We must first understand the context of the problem before we start solving it. Let's talk about how we can start to break out of this narrow-minded way of thinking. The first thing we need to do is change our perspective of how we approach test automation in the first place. And the first step of doing that is to develop some foundational thought processes that promote a more open way of thinking about test automation. The first one is the realization that just because something has worked in the past doesn't necessarily mean it's the right solution for the next problem or opportunity. Should it be considered? Maybe, but we don't know that until we understand the problem we're trying to solve. Next is to avoid the temptation of what industry best practices tell us to do. What's best for one group in their situation doesn't mean it's the best situation for another group, even in what looks like a similar situation. Rather, for each particular situation, there are appropriate practices. I'm not saying we can't learn from what we or others have done in the past. I'm just saying let's avoid the urge to blindly apply those solutions without first understanding the appropriateness. Another important one is the fear of the unknown or trying something new. Many times when I'm talking to a group about why they use a specific tool or approach, the reason boils down to an aversion to doing things differently. Because they know how to do something, even if they also realize it's not the best fit for the job, they push ahead without even considering other options. However, it's important to realize that it's okay to try and fail, maybe even multiple times, in order to learn something new. To borrow a concept from agile processes, as long as we're failing quickly, we're gaining important knowledge to help us get better. And if you think of all the epic failures that people talk about in test automation, the potential benefit of the new approach should outweigh the risk. Lastly, and closely related to the previous one, is an acceptance that there's nothing wrong with learning something new. It might be a new tool, a new utility, a new programming language, or a new approach, because it's the most appropriate solution. I realize there's a huge amount of inertia as well as external forces working against this one. We all have work to do, we all have deadlines, but let's balance that against the time, effort, and ultimately money that will be lost if you fail doing something that is wrong for your situation. And thinking back to the statistics from episode 1, the odds really aren't with you. So thank you again for tuning into QA Bytes. Be sure to look for the next installment on Getting Real with Test Automation. I'll be discussing how we can identify opportunities for automation in your specific context.